Good morning. It's Thursday, January 29th, 2026. Lots is going on in the world right now. Incidentally, the other day I posted a little blip of me reading the plot, and it seems like a good time for this in today's society. I'm going to start by saying I started reading when I was 2 or 3 years old. I was extremely advanced in my reading skills, and for that I brought into myself a world of knowledge and understanding of things that were going on. Sometimes maybe too age inappropriate, but not. So I have, over the years, gradually tried to teach Eris at her age what I felt she needed to know. And as of recently, being that she's now 10, I'm sharing more stories about our family history and what is going on in the world when she has questions. I've decided I'm going to start, or at least make an attempt, since I'm not so good at follow-through, to read something every day or as often as I can to people. Last night, we read chapters from the book Auggie and Me. Sorry, it's backwards. Auggie and Me is a continuation of the Wonder story. In this book, it talks about 3 perspectives of 3 students, but it starts with one of the main characters, Julian, who is very unsensitive about the harm and the, well, let's just put it this way, bullying and in all factors. He's probably a psychopath. He has no empathy, no remorse, etc. He goes to France after being suspended from school. His grandmother has no idea of the reasons behind his suspension, which draws back to the cruelty towards Auggie, who is a boy with facial deformities. It is a wonderful book, and I highly suggest that it's suggested to anybody. So anyway, going back, the young boy Julian goes to France to visit Grandma, and she thinks that he's been bullied. I read these chapters, and I realized that there's no coincidence. So let us start. Chapter, Grandma's story. I was a very popular girl when I was young, Julian, said Grandma. I had many friends. I had pretty clothes. As you can see, I've always liked pretty clothes. She waved her hands to her side to make sure that I noticed her dress, and she smiled. I was a frivolous girl, she continued, spoiled when the Germans came to France. I hardly took any notice. I knew that some Jewish families in my village were moving away, but my family was so cosmopolitan. My parents were intellectuals, atheists. We didn't even go to synagogue. She paused here and asked me to bring her a glass of wine, which I did. She served herself a full glass, and as she always did, offered me some too. And as I always did, I said, non merci. Like I said, Mom would go ballistic if she knew the stuff that Grandma did sometimes. There was a boy in my school called, well, they called him Aszocial, she continued. He was, how do you say the word? A crippled. Is that how you say it? I don't think people use that word anymore, Grandma, I said. It's not exactly politically correct, if you know what I mean. She flicked her hand at me. Americans are always coming up with new words we can't say anymore, she said. Alors, well, Tusha's legs were deformed from the polio. He needed 2 canes to walk with, and his back was all twisted. I think that's why he was called Tusha, crab. He walked sideways like a crab. I know, it sounds very harsh. Children were meaner in those days. I thought about how I called August the freak behind his back, but at least I never called him that to his face. Grandma continued talking. I have to admit, at first I wasn't into her telling me one of her long stories, but I was getting into this one. Tosha was a little thing, a skinny thing. None of us ever talked to him because he made us uncomfortable. He was so different. I never even looked at him, afraid he would accidentally touch me. It was easier to pretend that he didn't exist. She took a long sip of wine. One morning, a man came running into our school. I knew him. Everyone did. He was a Marquis, a partisan. Do you know what that is? Do you know what that is? He was against the Germans. He rushed into the school and told the teachers that the Germans were coming to take all of the Jewish children away. What? What is this? I could not believe what I was hearing. The teachers in the school went around to all the classes and gathered the Jewish children together. We were told to follow the Marquis into the woods. We were going to hide. Hurry, hurry, hurry. I think there was maybe 10 of us in all. Hurry, 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 escape. Grandmère looked at me to make sure that I was listening, which, of course, I was. It was snowing that morning and very cold, and all I could think of was, if I go into the woods, I will ruin my shoes. I was wearing these beautiful new red shoes that Papa had bought me, you see. And as I said before, I was a frivolous girl, perhaps even a little stupid. But this is what I was thinking. I did not even stop to think. Well, where is Mama and Papa? If the Germans were coming for the Jewish children, had they come for the parents already? This did not occur to me. All I could think about were my beautiful shoes. So instead of following the Marquis into the woods, I snuck away from the group and went to hide inside the bell tower of the school. There was a tiny room up there, full of crates and books, and there I hid. I remember thinking that I would go home in the afternoon after the Germans had come and tell Mama and Papa all about it. This is how stupid I was, Julian. I nodded. I couldn't believe I had never heard this story before. And then the Germans came, she said. There was a narrow window in the tower, and I could see them perfectly. I watched them run into the woods after the children. It did not take them very long to find them. They all came back together, the Germans, the children, the Marquis soldier. Grandmère paused and blanked a few times, and then she took a deep breath. They shot the Marquis in front of all the children, she said quietly. He fell so softly, Julian, in the snow. The children cried. They cried as they were led away in line. One of the teachers, Mademoiselle Petitjean, went with them, even though she was not Jewish. She said she would not leave her children. No one ever saw her again. Poor thing. By now, Julian, I had awakened from my stupidity. I was not thinking of my red shoes anymore. I was not thinking of my friends who had been taken away. I was thinking of my parents. I was waiting until it was nighttime so I could go home to them. But not all of the Germans had left. Some had stayed behind, along with the French police. They were searching for the school, and then I realized they were looking for me. Yes, for me, and for one or two of the other Jewish children who had not gone into the woods. I realized then that my friend Rachel had not been among the Jewish children who were marched away, nor Jacob, a boy from another village, who all the girls wanted to marry because he was so handsome. Where were they? They must have been hiding, just like I was. Then I heard creaking, Julian, up the stairs. I heard footsteps up the stairs, coming closer to me. I was so scared. I tried to make myself as small as possible behind the crate, and I hid my head beneath a blanket. Here! Grandma covered her head with her arms, as if to show me how she was hiding. And then I heard someone whisper my name, she said. It was not a man's voice. It was a child's voice. Sarah? The voice whispered again. I peeked out from the blanket. Tosia! I answered, astonished. I was so surprised, because in all the years I had known him, I don't think I had ever said a word to him, nor him to me. And yet there he was, calling my name. They will find you here, he said. Follow me. And I did follow him, for by now I was terrified. He led me down a hallway into the chapel of the school, where I'd never really been to before. We went to the back of the chapel where there was the crypt. All this was new to me. Julian and we walked through the crypt so that Germans would not see us through the windows, because they were looking for us still. I heard when they found Rachel. I heard her screaming in the courtyard as they took her away. Poor Rachel. Torsia took me down to the basement beneath the crypt. There must have been 100 steps at least. These were not easy for Torsia, as you can imagine, with his terrible limp and his 2 canes, but he hopped down the steps 2 at a time, looking behind him to make sure I was following. Finally, we arrived at a passage. It was so narrow, we had to walk sideways to get through. And then we were in the sewers, Julian. Can you imagine? I knew instantly because of the smell, of course. We were knee-deep in refuse. You can imagine the smell so much from my red shoes. We walked all night. It was so cold, Julian. Torsia was such a kind boy, though. He gave me his coat to wear. It was, to this day, the most noble act that anyone has ever done for me. He was freezing, too, but he gave me his coat. I was so ashamed for the way I had treated him. Oh, Julian, I was so ashamed. She covered her mouth with her fingers and swallowed. Then she finished the wine glass and poured herself another. The sewers led to Danvlier, a small village about 15 kilometers away from Aubervilliers. Mama and Papa had always avoided this town because of the smell. The sewers from Paris drained onto the farmland there. We couldn't even eat apples grown in Danvlier. But it is where Torsia lived. He took me to his house, and we cleaned ourselves by the well. And then Torsia brought me to the barn behind his house. He wrapped me in a horse blanket and told me to wait. He was going to get his parents. No, I pleaded. Please don't tell them. I was so frightened. I wondered if, when they saw me, would they call the Germans? You know, I had never met them before. But Torsia left, and a few minutes later he returned with his parents. They looked at me. I must have seemed quite pathetic there, all wet and shivering. The mother, Viviane, put her arms around me to comfort me. Oh, Julian, that hug was the warmest hug I have ever felt. I cried so hard in this woman's arms because I knew them. I knew that I would never cry in my own maman's arms again. I just knew it in my heart, Julian, and I was right. They had taken Maman that same day, along with the other Jews in the city. My father, who had been to work, had been warned that the Germans were coming and managed to escape. He was smuggled to Switzerland, but it was too late for Maman. She was deported that day to Auschwitz. I never saw her again. My beautiful Mama. She took a deep breath here and shook her head. Chapter 2. Grandmère was silent for a second. She was looking into the air like she could see it all happening again right in front of her. Now I understood why she had never talked about this before. Torsio's family hid me for 2 years in that barn, she continued slowly, even though it was dangerous for them. We were literally surrounded by Germans, and the French police had a large headquarters in Danvlier. But every day I thanked my Maker for the barn that was my home and the food that Torsio managed to bring me, even when there was hardly any food to go around. People were starving in those days, Julian, and yet they fed me. It was a kindness that I will never forget. It is always brave to be kind. But in those days, such kindness could cost you your life. Grandmère started to get teary-eyed at this point. She took my hand. The last time I saw Toshio was 2 months before the liberation. He had brought me some soup. It wasn't even soup. It was water with a little bit of bread and onions in it. We had both lost so much weight. I was in rags. So much for my pretty clothes. Even so, we managed to laugh, Torsio and I. We laughed about things that happened in our school, even though I could not go there anymore, of course. Torsio still went every day. At night, He would tell me everything he had learned so much so that I would stay smart. He would tell me about my old friends too and how they were doing. They all still ignored him, of course, and he never revealed to any of them that I was still alive. No one could know. No one could be trusted. But Torchio was an excellent narrator, and he made me laugh a lot. He could do wonderful imitations, and he even had funny nicknames for all of my friends. Imagine that, Torchio making fun of them. I had no idea you were so mischievous, I told him. All those years you were probably laughing at me behind my back. Laughing at you? He said, never. I had a crush on you. I never laughed at you. Besides, I only laughed at the kids who made fun of me. You never made fun of me. You simply ignored me. I called you Torchio. And so? Everyone called me that. I really don't mind. I like crabs. Oh, Torchio, I am so ashamed, I answered. And I remember I covered my face with both my hands. At this point, Grandma covered her face with her hands, and although her fingers were bent and with arthritis now, and I could see her veins, I pictured her young hands covering her young face so many years ago. Torchio took my hands with his own hands, she continued, slowly removing her hands from her face, and he held my hands for a few seconds. I was 14 years old, and I had never kissed a boy, but he kissed me that day, Julian. Grandmère closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. After he kissed me, I said to him, I don't want to call you Torchio anymore. What is your name? Grandmère opened her eyes and looked at me. Can you guess what he said? She asked. I raised my eyebrows as if to say, no, how would I know? And then she closed her eyes again and smiled. He said, my name is Julian. Chapter Julian. Oh my God, I cried. That's why you named Dad Julian? Even though everyone called him Jules, that was his name. Oui, she said, nodding. And I'm named after Dad? I said, so I'm named after this kid? This is so cool. She smiled and ran her fingers through my hair, but she didn't say anything. Then I remembered her saying, the last time I saw Torchio. So what happened to him? I said, to Julian. Almost instantly, tears rolled down Grandma's cheeks. The Germans took him, she said. That same day, he was on his way to school. They were making another sweep of the village that morning. By now, Germany was losing the war and knew it. But, I said, he wasn't even Jewish. They took him because he was crippled, she said between sobs. I'm sorry, I know you told me that word is a bad word, but I don't know any other word in English. He was an invalid. That is the word in French, and that is why they took him. He was not perfect. She practically spat out the word. They took all the imperfects from the village that day. It was a purge. The gypsies, the shoemaker's son, who was simple, and Julian, my Torchio, they put him in a cart with others. And then he was put on the train to Drancy, and from there to Auschwitz, like my mother. We heard later from someone who saw him there that they sent him to the gas chambers right away. Just like that, poof, he was gone. My savior, my little Julian. She stopped to wipe her eyes with the handkerchief and then drank the rest of her wine. His parents were devastated, of course. And Bimir and Monsieur Boumer and Mademoiselle Boumer, she continued. We didn't find out he was dead until after the liberation, but we knew. We knew. She dabbed her eyes. I lived with them for another year after the war. They treated me like a daughter. They were the ones who helped track down Papa, although it took some time to find him. So much chaos in those days. And when Papa finally was able to return to Paris, I went to live with him. But I always visited the Bimers, even when they were very old. I never forgot the kindness that they showed me. She sighed. She had finished her story. Grandmere, I said after a few minutes, that's like the saddest thing I've ever heard. I didn't know you were in the war. I mean, Dad never talked about any of this. She shrugged. I think it's very possible I never told your father this story. She said, I don't like to talk about the things, sad things, you know. In some ways, I'm still the frivolous girl I used to be. But when I heard you talking about that little boy in school, I could not help but think of Aszocial, of how afraid I had once been of him, of how badly we had treated him because of his deformity. Those children had been so mean to him, Julian, it breaks my heart to think of it. And when she said that, I don't know, something really broke inside of me, completely unexpected. I looked down and all of a sudden I started to cry. And when I started to cry, I don't mean a few tears rolling down my cheeks. I mean like full-scale, snot-filled crying. Julian, she said softly. I shook my head and covered my face with my hands. I was terrible, Grandmere, I whispered. I was so mean to Auggie. I'm so sorry, Grandmere. Julian, she said again. Look at me. No! Look at me, monsieur. She took my face in her hands and forced me to look at her. I felt so embarrassed. I really couldn't look her in the eyes. Suddenly, that word that Mr. Tushman had used, that word that everyone kept trying to force on me, came to me like a shout. Remorse! Yes, there it was, the word in all of its glory, remorse. I was shaking with remorse. I was crying with remorse. Julian, said Grandma, we all make mistakes, monsieur. No, but you don't understand, I answered. It wasn't just one mistake. I was those kids who were mean to Aszocial. I was the bully, Grandma. It was me. She nodded. I called him a freak. I laughed behind his back. I left mean notes, I screamed. Mom kept making excuses for why I did that stuff, but there wasn't any excuse. I just did it. And I don't even know why. I don't even know. I was crying so hard I couldn't even speak. Grandmere stroked my head and hugged me. Julian, she said softly, you are so young. The things you did, you know they were not right. But that does not mean you are not capable of doing right. It only means that you choose to do wrong. And this is what I mean when I say you made a mistake. It was the same with me. I made a mistake with Aszocial. But the good thing about life, Julian, she continued, is that we can fix our mistakes sometimes. We learn from them. We get better. I never made a mistake like the one I made with Aszocial again. Not with anyone in my life. And I have had a very, very long life. You will learn from your mistake too. You must promise yourself that you will never behave like that with anyone else again. One mistake does not define you. Do you understand me? You must simply act better next time. I nodded, but I still cried for a long, long time after that. I haven't read that chapter to her yet. Not sure how I'm going to. I knew when I was reading it that Aszocial would be considered an Aszocial. That's spelled Ascocial. Again, Ascocial. Asocial is the German word for anyone who does not fit the typical standards of the white Anglo-Saxon, Christian-based, perfect human. That was Germany. And it happens everywhere else around the globe. And today it is happening here. Today we are seeing people being herded up, stuffed in carts, put in buses, and brought to facilities that we don't know anything about. And maybe we don't want to find out 50 years later when they start digging those mass graves and they start finding the evidence that there was more to this than we ever imagined. I'm trying to teach my daughter kindness and to teach her this history. Why do I know about Aszocial? I know about Aszocial because one of my ancestors is listed on the Holocaust Remembrance site. His name was Conrad Nageldinger. He was arrested at his family's door. We don't fully know whether maybe my family was Jewish, but we do know that Aszocials were those that weren't perfect, or also those that were trying to do the good to fight against the evil. Aszocial. That's what they called us. Peace be with you.